time for a change in this country, my friends.
Death to Canada! Death to the United States! And death to Israel!
All right, everyone, let's dive into something that's stirring quite a bit of conversation. We've got politicians, policies, and promises. Oh my. Today, we're taking a closer look at a recent committee session on Canada's immigration policies, particularly the growing concerns around expiring visas, international students, and the challenges of managing population growth. Now, stick with me here because this one's a roller coaster. We're talking numbers in the hundreds of thousands, and let me tell you, some of the exchanges got, well, let's just say, heated. From accountability to the infamous bad actors, there's a lot to unpack. So grab your coffee or tea, hit that like button, and let's break down this debate together. Are we seeing leadership in action, or is it just a game of political hot potato? Let's get into it.
Of the supplementary estimates B 2024-25, votes 1B, 5B, and 10B under Department of Citizenship and Immigration. Now we will go to the honourable members. We will start with the honourable member, Mr. Kmitch, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, your department tabled documents with Parliament that show that 4.9 million visas are going to expire between September 2024 and December 2025. How will we know how many of those actually wind up leaving?
As you noted, MP Kmitch, that when people come here, in many of their visa documents, they undertake to leave. As part of the levels plan, there will be some visas that are temporary in nature that will not be renewed, and those people, when they undertook to come here, will be expected to leave, and that is simply a fact. We'll have to monitor that carefully. There are many measures within our department to monitor these things, but it's one that,
Minister,
given the volume in question, it's something that we'll have to be very careful in supervising.
1 second, Mr. Kmitch, I stop the work. Let him finish. And you can ask. Would appreciate that. Okay, so I'll go to Minister. You have finished your remarks. Okay, honourable member Kmitch, please.
Minister, I wasn't asking about whether they will leave or not. I'm asking you how will you ensure that a person whose visa has expired will leave? We know that just on study permits, there are 766,000 expiring by the end of December 2025. How will your department ensure that at the end of those study permit periods, those persons will leave?
Again, there are many ways that people leave the country, Tom. The vast majority leave voluntarily, and that's what's expected.
So explain those ways. How will you ensure it?
We work with our partners, including CBSA, to investigate, obviously, and prosecute those who violate immigration law. If someone refuses to leave, they're in violation of the law. And CBSA, after due process, has the legal obligation to remove people. Again, this isn't something that is taken lightly, but in the vast majority of cases, those people that have come here temporarily and do not have the right to stay, in fact, leave.
So then my next question will be, your plan calls for a cap on international students, 485,000 2024, 437,000 2025. There's been adjustments to those. So obviously there's a discrepancy between the two. So how many do you project will leave the country then at the end of December 2025? All 766,000? What's the proportion? What are the forecasts the department has?
You'll have to be clear on that. A discrepancy between what and what?
Between the number of people who will be allowed into the country and then the number of people who will be on a study permit that's expiring. So those who are expiring the end of December 2025, how many of them will actually leave? Are you saying 100% will be expected to leave, or are you going to send CBSA to chase all 766,000?
You know that is not what happens. There are a number of things that occur. Some people actually get renewals. Some people get postgraduate work permits and stay a longer period. And we do work with CBSA to monitor these things. And when Statistics Canada reports on these, they take into account a whole variety of factors in estimating how many people are here and how many people have left.
So at the end of this year, 2024, how many international students do you expect to leave, and how many have left so far when their study permits expired?
How many have left as
So far.
of November today? We don't
Or
have
October
that number.
1st? Can you provide those to the committee?
I don't know. We could look into it.
Minister, how can you not know? It's in the immigration levels plan. There's a bunch of charts on page 22 starting about temporary resident immigration to Canada, persons who are in the country. It's in the immigration levels plan. It's in there. So how can you not know what that number would be? There's an order paper question, these government documents that were signed by your parliamentary secretary that were tabled with Parliament that has the numbers. So there's supposed to be expiring study permits in December, 84,642. And then in November, 36,130. In October, 10,182. In the month before, 127,348. So how many of those people are still in the country? How many have received the renewal? And how many of them have CBSA now looking at them?
What I can provide to you as a number is the expected decrease over that period over the 3-year period, which is about 450 the first year, 450 the next year. That's net, incoming and outcoming, with a slight increase in 2027.
So again, so how are you going to track then those whose work permits are expiring by the end of 2025? Again, it's in the hundreds of thousands. You're not giving me much confidence or Canadians confidence that you have a plan, because we have a breakdown by month how many student visas and work visas are expiring, and you haven't provided any information on the means. How are you going to do it? You say you have partner organizations, you're working with people. What are you actually doing? What's the process? How are you going to ensure people abide by the visa conditions?
As I said to you before, just like the vast majority of people that come to the country, on a temporary basis, the vast majority leave. In some cases, increasingly many, I will concede, people decide to choose. They are in a situation of irregularity in that case. Once they have exhausted their remedies, they are removed by CBSA.
So that's interesting, because you've made public statements repeatedly claiming and saying and alleging, based on IRCC data, that is not what's going on. And that's why the IRB now has a record number of backlogged applications for asylum. And you have said that tens of thousands of them are actually international students who are staying longer to applying for asylum. And you're claiming they don't have a legitimate claim to make. That those are your quotes, the headlines you're generating by doing communications out there. So are you saying you don't have a plan, that this is part of your plan to have an increasing backlog at the IRB to deal with it?
Thank you. The time is up. Minister, you please respond.
There are an increasing number of international students making asylum claims, I think with very little hope, given their conditions. They, whether you like it or not, are entitled to a form of due process in this country. I don't think you would purport to deny it to them. Are there things we can do to make sure that's more streamlined? I would encourage you to follow the next few weeks as we propose more amendments to the immigration system and the asylum system. But let's recall that every party in this House, except for the Liberal Party, voted down our asylum reforms in the budget. A bit shameful, considering that Conservatives had proposed these in earlier years, but you chose to play politics about it. This is a system that is in need of reform, and it's in need of reform in the right way.
Thank you. We'll go to MP Zahid.
In the estimates B, there is also funding for the interim housing assistance program. So could you elaborate on the assistance the government has provided to cities like Toronto, who are trying to deal with the increasing homelessness?
Absolutely. It's important not to treat asylum seekers that are in a different situation than people that are homeless. Unfortunately, people do wind up on the streets. It is a matter of great discussion that I had with Mayor Chow when I first came into this role. We were able to come to an agreement on making sure that Toronto was compensated. There is a natural flow of people towards the big city centres, with big airports like Pearson and Trudeau. Migrants either move into Montreal or flow into Toronto, increasingly towards Ontario, to be frank. And we have to make sure that not only the government of Ontario is at the table, but we are supporting municipalities that are shouldering a lot of this burden without the fiscal levers that provinces and the federal government would have. I've recently visited the Peel Centre with Mayor, and then spoke to Mayor Brown as a result of his advocacy to get this up and coming. It'll be a game changer in the area. Obviously, the federal government has to do a good job in bringing the asylum numbers down, which are high again this year. But to the extent people come here and claim asylum and don't have a place to stay, it isn't everyone that doesn't have a place to stay. There has to be a place to process them, make sure they have a roof over their head, and to get them into the job market as they wait their due process from the IRB.
Have you actually done an analysis of what the economic impacts would be with this levels plan in terms of the reduction in the number of people that are needed for various different industries and what the implications are for institutions? Have you actually done a economic analysis with your plan? And if yes, will you table it?
I think is there a separate discrete study done by our department? There are ones that are done in the context of preparing the levels plans, but I've read a number of studies about the impacts. And in some cases, there will be some pain, and it's important adjustment for society and for example, institutions that have, I think, unfairly relied on international students to bolster their own balance sheets.
Well, just to note, $31 billion in terms of Canada's GDP from international students alone, and that's based on the 2022 numbers. I'm talking about IRCC, your own department's analysis. Have you done one, and will you table it?
My question to you is, and the institutions perhaps that you're making yourself the voice for, is who's going to pay for all the asylum claims that come out of those institutions as a result of people not being able to get their postgraduate permits and not leaving the country? Are those institutions paying for it?
Thank you very much. The time is up, and we'll go to.
If you are, then tell the
MP
United
Khanna.
Nations.
MP,
That's Canada's changed position.
sorry, MP Kwan.
You don't get it both ways. Sorry.
I'm sorry, MP Kwan. Please, we gave you enough time, and it doesn't work with us here. So it has to be fair with everyone. MP Khanna, please go ahead for 6 minutes. Oh, 5 minutes, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, a few weeks ago, the Prime Minister put out a great video or propaganda piece that he was trying to outline his future plans. He mentioned bad actors. It's been about 2 weeks since that video has come out. Can you elaborate on who those bad actors are?
There are, as you know, because you're familiar with some of them, MP Khanna, immigration consultants that do not act properly and are giving false advice to people in the false hope of being able to stay here. There are institutions, for example, that are relying on international students and not providing the proper education and making false promises about their prospective employment. There are, in the labor market impact assessment world that I know you're familiar with, there's a lot of money exchanging hands where labor market impact assessment shouldn't cost anything. So there's lots of people that are responsible here. It isn't simply about people that have committed fraud. It's about the ecosystem as well that's been created, which has been an incentive and it may be a $31 billion industry when it comes to international students, but chasing short-term gain with a lot of long-term pain. And I mentioned that earlier with respect to the cost of what asylum seekers would cost coming out of an international student system that was supposed to breed excellence and not asylum claims.
Okay, and are you missing anyone else off that list? I know it's been a while, but anyone else you're missing that you think should be considered a bad actor?
I know you have your view on it, so why don't you share it?
Well, it's a simple question. Since 2015, who was in charge of the federal government that increased temporary foreign worker permits by 154%?
I want to say that the federal government has responsibility here. It is a much broader analysis than simply putting it on the shoulders of one institution, but it is important for the federal government. Maybe I can finish my thought. It is important for the government to acknowledge that we could have gotten things right in many measures. There is a conundrum that comes with any immigration program, and one of those is the impact that this has had, these immigration plans, pretty much regardless of category, on making the labor force younger, on increasing the GDP of this country, extremely important coming out of COVID with structural challenges in the supply chain. There are some people here temporarily that made sure that we didn't get through, that we got through a recession. And that's important to note. The economy has been fueled by immigration. But again, it is not an unlimited supply. And any responsible government, like the federal government, has to make sure that it is managing and controlling a system in the volumes that are acceptable to Canada.
So who was responsible for the 211% increase we saw when it came to international students since 2015? Who was the government in charge that signed off on that?
Those are two different questions. We are responsible for putting together an international student program that institutions leveraged and abused to some extent in the volume of people that they brought in. Let me also say this, and you know this, the federal government is the only one that doesn't make any money directly from this. The provincial government, Ontario, for example, makes about $1,000 a head on every international student and has abused this system in bringing in people to study at institutions, some very reputable, some that are the pride of this country, but some that pretty much didn't exist. And so that's something we've had to rein in. You can just speak yourself to Mayor Brown about what he's living through in Brampton, and I think you would know exactly who I'm talking about.
Minister, it looks like you're passing the buck and you're blaming other bad actors, but the population growth we saw of 300%, the highest it's ever been since 1950s, is a federal responsibility. You are the one that is signing off on these approvals. It is your government that is responsible for this, but it looks like to me that you're just literally pointing fingers at everyone else but yourself and your predecessors in Canada. Do you not think it's right for you to take some responsibility for these actions that have taken place? Do you not? Shouldn't you put Mark or Sean Fraser on the list as well of some of those bad actors that have been a part of the problem?
Sean Fraser is one of the guys who counseled me to do this, and we all bear our.
So after creating the problem,
there's lots of responsibility to go around, Arpan, and I think you'll know that immigration is a shared responsibility. Provinces, institutions of various descriptions come to us and ask us for different programs. We have a very important role in making sure that we get it right, and that's why I introduced the measures that I did last year with another wave in the fall, in addition to the levels plan that is the subject of conversation today.
Minister, how many permanent residents do you expect in the next 3 years?
I expect what's in the levels plan. So 395,000 next year, a reduction of 105,000, 380 the next, and the year after that, 365,000.
And how many temporary resident permits do you expect to issue in those 3 years?
You can look in the levels plan for that.
I'm asking you, Minister.
It's in the levels plan.
I'm asking you for those numbers, Minister.
Look in the levels plan.
Do you not know the numbers?
I know the numbers.
Then what are the numbers?
How much time do we have?
Lots of time, Minister. Lots of time. What's the numbers?
You're not the chair, Larplan.
2 minutes, Minister. We still have 2 minutes to the round.
We'll look in the levels plan. Harpreet, if you have that, feel free to share, or we can actually table those. I can.
It's okay. Just give me the answer. It's okay.
No, he said new ones. So the target for 2025 is 673,650. For 2026, 516,600, and in 2027, 543,000 permits.
So if you do the math, so we're expecting probably 3 million people coming to Canada in the next 3 years, both permanent and temporary residents, correct?
Again, if you need to be able to look at what the net population increase is for that period of time, and for the next 2 years, it'll be reductions with an increase over the next year.
Okay. Last week, your officials confirmed to us that you're seeing skyrocketing refugee asylum claims with a wait time of 44 months for some of them. What are you doing to bring those numbers down in terms of wait times and to make sure that these cases are heard as soon as possible?
Well, if you looked in the last budgetary exercise, we put a substantial amount of money in making sure the IRB could process more volume. It's, they are an independent body, so there's only so much pressure that we can exert on them. They do a great job, but with the volume that we're seeing, they are admittedly heavily charged with the numbers of cases that they're seeing. I put forth a package, and you would know this because your party rejected it in the last budgetary exercise to reform the asylum system, but you all sat there and smiled and shot it down with the Bloc and the NDP. So I plan to put forward more measures. I want to reform the system. It's not working in the way it should. That's a function of volume, but also a function of efficiency. The growing claims that we see now inland are not unexpected. They're ones that we saw with people having increasingly fewer hopes to stay in Canada and being counseled to file, I think unjustly, asylum claims where they don't, where they shouldn't have the ability to do so.
Thank you very much. We will go to MP Ali.
I'd like to turn to the Lebanon community. And as the minister indicated, there's been measures for people who are already here in Canada, but there are no measures for family members with loved ones who are stuck in Lebanon right now. Why did the government not bring in special immigration measures for them?
I'd refer you simply, MP Kwan, to the previous answer I gave to MP Zaid. When it comes to Lebanon, it is a particularly, you can shake your head at me all you want, but you either want the answer or you don't. It is a particularly unique situation of having Canadian residents and permanent residents in numbers that we don't see in any other country pretty much around the world in a crisis situation, and our focus and all the logistics and planning needs to remain on them.
It's actually not me who's shaking my head, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chair, is the family members with loved ones. I'm aware of a family whose spouse, a Canadian family member, whose spouse and child are being left behind. They cannot get a visa to get to safety, and they're being asked to leave their spouse and child behind. That is the reality. That's what people are reacting to. I'm pretty sure MP Saeed would have heard about these cases and is equally concerned with the situation. And so we have in the immigration levels plan that the government, the minister, you're reducing the refugee numbers actually by 20% in 2025. And we have not only just the Lebanese Canadian community who cannot get to safety, that there's no special immigration measure for them. Sudanese communities, applications are severely delayed. So far, there's been a complete failure with Gaza. Hong Kongers are going to be faced with 8 years waiting to try and get their permanent residence. I can go on. Afghans, by the way. I have a giant pile of Afghan applications. And guess what? They've gone through all of their processing. Everything has been done. And you know what? They're bringing forward date in a letter is in July of 2025. Minister, how do you explain that? That all these applications are just faced with severe delays.
We, as you know, we've welcomed 53,000 people from Afghanistan, and you're sighing at that again. But I mean,
yeah, and people are dying as their applications are being brought forward in July of 2025. Explain that to them as they're hiding from the Taliban and their lives are in jeopardy every second of the day.
We've welcomed 53,000 people from Afghanistan, and your grandstanding won't change the great accomplishment so that we've been able to do as a country.
I actually have a pile of applications of people whose lives are in danger, waiting for you to take action. People who served Canada.
Okay, on behalf of the committee members, I want to thank the Honourable Minister for being with us. We will suspend.
Another day, another committee meeting. So let's talk about what we just witnessed here, folks. First, let's set the stage. The Honourable Minister is being grilled about the staggering number of expiring study permits and temporary visas in Canada. We're talking about numbers in the hundreds of thousands. Yet, the big question remains unanswered. How do we ensure these individuals leave the country when their permits expire? Let's break it down. The minister starts by reiterating what we've heard before. Most people leave voluntarily. But here's where it gets tricky. The opposition is pressing for concrete measures, asking, what's the plan for the ones who don't leave? And, well, the response, it's vague at best. A lot of talk about partnerships with agencies like the CBSA and monitoring efforts. But come on, monitoring. That's not a plan. That's an admission that there's no control, just hope. And then there's the international student cap. Now, this cap is supposed to control the influx of students, but the numbers don't seem to add up. The opposition asked a fair question. Of the 766,000 study permits expiring by 2025, how many students will actually leave? The minister's answer? A whole lot of deflection. Some will stay with renewed permits. Some might apply for asylum, and for the rest? Well, we're just supposed to trust the process. Does that give anyone confidence? Not me. Speaking of asylum claims, there's another bombshell. a record number of backlog cases at the IRB. The minister admits that international students are increasingly filing asylum claims. Why? Because they're out of options. He calls it due process, and sure, that's true. But doesn't that point to a broken system? People are leveraging loopholes because they have no other recourse. And let's not ignore the bad actors. The minister mentions shady immigration consultants, fraudulent institutions, and questionable practices. But here's the kicker. The federal government approved policies that enabled this. The opposition didn't hesitate to point fingers at the current administration for inflating immigration numbers without a robust system to manage them. Fair criticism? Absolutely. Then comes the awkward dance around accountability. The opposition demands answers about who's responsible for the surge in immigration numbers. And what do we get? A lot of finger pointing to provinces, institutions, even consultants. But let's not forget who holds the pen on federal immigration policies. The minister says we all bear responsibility, but isn't that just a polite way of saying, I won't take the blame? And here's a sobering thought. This isn't just about numbers. There's a human cost. Municipalities like Toronto are overwhelmed, homelessness among migrants is rising, and asylum claims are dragging the system down. The government's response? More promises of reform. But as one opposition member put it, this isn't giving Canadians confidence. Honestly, same here. Let's wrap this up. Immigration is essential for Canada's growth. No argument there. But if you're going to bring in hundreds of thousands of people, you'd better have a plan for when their time is up. What we saw today was a lot of talk, a lot of deflection, and very little clarity. The opposition didn't get the answers they were looking for, and frankly, neither did we. So, what do you think? Are we managing immigration responsibly, or is this a system spiraling out of control? Let me know in the comments. And hey, while you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, stay informed and stay critical.
No wonder crime is rocketing.